Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to be here. And I don't really know what it is that you might want to hear from me, but I'll say some things, and then if they're not right, shout at me and tell me to say something else. I've never written for television, and I know that most of you are writers for television. It's not something I've ever done. I couldn't do it. I think you have to be too intelligent. I'm not intelligent enough, but I very much admire what you do. I think the art of television is all about not saying everything that you know as the writer. In my books, I always say everything that I know. I don't hold anything back. So I admire what you do. What I thought I would tell you about a little bit is what I think that art is for. Why do we need this thing called art? You know, we often hear that art is very important, and we can't just have a society where people make guns or shoes or smartphones, that we also need this thing called art. And this applies to paintings, poems, TV dramas, novels, photographs, across the art forms. Why do we need this thing called art? Now, I think that we need art because we've got some problems in our mind. There are some things that we are not very good at doing, and art helps us to get better. So if you like, art is a tool, and we need art in the same way as we need tools like buckets or knives. You know, why do you need a bucket or a knife? We need a bucket because our hands are not very good at carrying water, and you need a knife because your fingernails are not good at chopping through hard substances. So we need help in various areas, and I think the thing we call art is the tool to give us help. Now, what are the areas in which we need this help? Let me give you 7 examples, 7 categories of areas where we need art. The first thing is that we are very forgetful creatures. We forget everything. You know, we all wander around with our phones, and whenever we see something that's interesting, beautiful, special, the first thing we want to do is to pick up our phone and take a picture of it, or maybe a little video of it. And the reason we want to do that is that we know that our memory is bad. We have a bad memory. And therefore, we want to record things that are meaningful, special, beautiful, interesting. So what do people record? They record their children when they're growing up. They record people that they love. They record beautiful places that they've been to. They record sporting events. So we want to record what is valuable, a very basic impulse. And certainly if you look at the history of painting begins with the desire to preserve experiences, to hold on to them. That's the beginning of certainly a lot of the visual arts. What about some of the other reasons? Let me come to my second reason why I think we need art. One of these reasons is that we are very likely to despair. We are not very good at being hopeful. And we need works of art that can make us hopeful again. If you look at some of the most popular music, television programs, paintings, they do something which is very, very simple, but I think extremely important to realize. What they do is they give us hope again. The most popular painting at the Louvre in Paris, the most popular postcard in the Louvre Museum in Paris is a postcard of Monet's Water Lilies. Beautiful image of a peaceful garden with water lilies. And people love to buy this postcard. Why do they love this postcard? Well, they love it because life is not normally like this. Life is normally tough, it's hard, it's cynical, but all of us have a terrible need for calm, for sweetness, for hope, and a painting like that will give us hope. Similarly, if you think of a lot of music is designed to give us hope. You know, why do people listen to Hey Jude by Paul McCartney? This is a song of hope. It ends with a very rousing attempt to say that things will be okay, and love will solve some of the problems of life. Now, it's very important to remember that all of us know intellectually that it's important to have a hopeful life or to be kind to other people. But the problem is that unless we have a work of art to convince us that these things are important, we will forget them. So, for example, everyone knows that it's good to be kind to your neighbors. This is, you're told this from when you're the age of 3, 2, 3. And we all know this intellectually. But the reason we need art is that we are not only intellectual, we are emotional creatures, and art is a way of getting through to somebody in an emotional level. So in other words, the intellectual idea of kindness is going to be quite sterile and quite dead. But when we watch one of your TV dramas or a wonderful film and see that the actors and the plot are suggesting that kindness is good, we will switch off the television program, we will walk out of the cinema, and we will think, yes, I really do want to be good and kind. In other words, a work of art will take a sterile aphorism, you must be good, and turn it into something that can touch and motivate and really move us to actually be good. So that's the second use, I think, of art, to restore hope and to do so in a way that touches our heart in an active way. There's another reason I think we need art, and that is that we very often feel lonely and persecuted and isolated, and we feel sad, and on top of it all, we feel we are alone in our sadness. Society is very cheerful. When you meet people, they say, how are you? You have to say, oh, I'm fine, how are you? And in fact, inside, you may be dying, you may be crying, you may be lonely, you may be in pain, but you cannot say that to anyone else because they don't have time, because they don't care. And so you are left alone. And art is this very important resource where the sadness in me can meet the sadness in you in a form which is dignified, which is moving, which gives you a feeling that you are not alone in a good way. So if you look at the plot lines of so many novels, TV dramas, films, etc., what they do is they reflect, they hold a mirror to our sadness, to the way that we were humiliated by our boss, or the cruelty of our father, or maybe the misunderstanding of a friend. And we see in a work of art that this is not just our suffering, it belongs to life. And so works of art are tremendously important at reassuring us that we are not alone in this pain. There's another reason why I think art matters, and that is that all of us are a little bit unbalanced. We lack balance in some form or another. Maybe we are too rigid, we are too committed to our work. Maybe we are not committed enough, maybe we're a bit lazy. Maybe we are too strict, or maybe we are too lenient. Maybe we are too obsessed by money, or not obsessed enough. Perhaps we love cities a bit too much and have forgotten about the countryside. Or we love the country, but we are afraid of the city. All of us are unbalanced in some way. And very often, it's works of art that introduce us to a missing side of us. Let's imagine someone who is leading a very busy life, who has no time for anything. And let's say they go to the National Museum here, and they come across a beautiful 17th century moon jar, wonderful, quiet piece of ceramic, pale, simple. And they might look at that moon jar, and they will fall in love with it, and they will say, I want to be a little bit more like this moon jar. The moon jar contains an element of a balanced life that they have forgotten about. So I would say that the art we love is often the art that teaches us things that we don't have enough of in ourselves. I remember a very serious friend of mine. He was a lawyer. He was always very rational. He was very strict. He worked very hard. He did all his exams. And then suddenly, at about the age of 30, he fell in love with South American art. He filled his apartment with vibrant colors of South American art. He filled his music collection full of the songs of the samba and other romantic, dramatic songs. He went to spend holidays in Cuba and Peru and Bolivia. I said to him, what's going on? And he said to me, and I'll never forget it, he said, I'm just trying to find some equilibrium. I'm just trying to get straightened again. His life needed works of art which could rebalance his character. All of us need to find works of art, and it won't be the same ones for all of us, because all of us are unbalanced in different ways, but it'll be some certain sorts of works of art which will help to give balance back to us. Another reason why, the fifth reason why we need to find works of art, why we need art, is that we're not very good at understanding ourselves. You know, very often you imagine that because you live in your own body and mind, you will know what's going on inside it. But often that's not true. You know, we all know that feeling sometimes when you read a book written by somebody else, and you think, hey, the author knows me better than I know myself. I'm beginning to understand myself because of something that somebody else has written. Or you'll see a TV drama about a family, and you will see the dynamics of the family, and you'll think, hey, that's my family. But it's described in a way that helps you to understand your family, and perhaps before you hadn't quite so clearly. So works of art are not just mirrors, they are also, if you like, glasses that bring things into focus, that help us to understand ourselves more than we could understand if we were simply left alone. There's another reason, a sixth reason, why I think works of art matter. And I think that is because all of us are a bit frightened of some things. There's some things that we think of as a bit too foreign, a bit too strange. And it could be lots of things. It could be people from another country. It could be people from a different social class. It could be people from a different age or a different part of our country or a different job. And often what we find in works of art is a description of the foreigner that helps us to understand the foreigner and helps us to find that the foreigner is actually a human being and we can feel close to them. There's a lot of Scandinavian television drama at the moment that's doing very well in England. Now, for years, no one knew anything about Denmark in Britain. And then suddenly, there were various television dramas that did really well in Britain, describing life in Denmark. And suddenly, Denmark has become a really cool country for British people. They want to go to Denmark. They want to visit it. They don't think of Danish people as strange and foreign because they've seen a good TV drama about their life. It sounds almost simple, but you know, it's such a powerful medium of diplomacy. One country understands another. I know that Korean television dramas do very well in places like Japan, also in Vietnam, in the Philippines, in other countries of Asia, Southeast Asia, this whole region. You guys have captured the imagination of a lot of different countries. And that has changed Korea's status in the region. It seems odd to think that a drama about, you know, a husband or a wife or some children at school, etc., that this could change how a whole country is viewed and the power it has. But this is soft power, and it's immensely important. And, you know, in Britain, at the moment, people still don't understand Korea. And the reason they don't understand Korea is there are no TV dramas on British television about Korea. But if there were, you would find a complete and immediate change. In other words, culture introduces nations to one another. And it seems so important that we watch each other's television and that we buy programs from abroad. And the heads of television stations are always so conservative. They say, oh no, this is a drama from another country. It's so far away, no one will understand. Or this is a documentary from somebody with a foreign accent. It will never work. And 9 times out of 10, it works beautifully. So I would urge anyone here who's involved in the commissioning process to take that risk. Art is an extremely important way in which countries learn about one another. In the boldest terms, it stops people going to war. Because who do you drop a bomb on? You drop a bomb on people that you don't understand. And you don't understand them because you've never seen their art. So in other words, one of the best defenses that any country can have is to suggest to its neighbors who it is really and why it would be a very sad idea to drop bombs on it. Another reason, and the last reason why we need works of art, and I think it's because we get very lazy. We are very spoiled. Whenever we live too much in one area, in one social setting, we forget what's special about it. We forget that Seoul is a very unusual city. We forget that our family is very special, really. We forget that our friends are really quite amazing, that our workplaces can, on a good day, be extraordinary places of energy, etc. But none of that starts to seem real anymore after a while. We get spoiled. We don't see it anymore until we see a work of art. One of my most famous works of art, one of my most favorite works of art, of painting this is a beautiful bunch of asparagus that the French painter Édouard Manet painted in the 19th century. It's a very simple picture of a bunch of asparagus in the springtime. It's the springtime, and Manet saw these asparagus, a simple vegetable, in his kitchen, and he makes a big painting, well, not that big, about this big, painting of them, painting them beautifully. And when you look at that painting, you think, yes, I remember, asparagus are pretty beautiful. They're kind of interesting. And painters do this with lots of things. They do this with tomatoes and bananas and springtime. When you see a painting of springtime, you think, yes, I hadn't normally noticed spring until a painter has opened my eyes to the beauty of this. And artists take photographs of other things too, maybe airports. After all, airports are very beautiful. We never think airports are beautiful until maybe an artist like Wim Wenders comes along and takes a beautiful image of an airport. And you think, yes, there is a certain kind of lonely, haunting beauty. So, in other words, writers and artists and painters and filmmakers are there to excite us again about the world. Children are always excited about the world. They find everything amazing. As we grow up, we forget what is amazing. And artists, you guys, are some of the tools which help to wake us up again to the fact that life is quite simply extraordinary. We tend to discover this if we went to the doctor and the doctor said, you have cancer, you have only 3 months to live. We would panic and we say, the world is so beautiful, I never noticed it before. Well, artists are people who try and tell you the world is beautiful and interesting and special and dramatic before you have a cancer diagnosis. So take them seriously. So in all these areas, these 7 areas, art helps us. Art is a corrective of these 7 areas of fragility. It corrects our bad memory. It gives us hope. It is a source of sadness, which is dignified. It puts our sadness in a beautiful frame where we are no longer embarrassed of it. It rebalances us. It gives us things that we really need. It helps us to find self-knowledge. It extends our own experience. It takes us to the foreigner. It teaches us that the foreigner is not a stranger. And lastly, it reawakens us to the beauty and the interest of the world that we live in every day, but have forgotten is so very, very special. I believe that art is not just entertainment. You often hear it said by serious people in suits, you must get this all the time. They go, how nice you're an artist or a writer. Very sweet. Who pays the bill? And you go, no, me, it's my career. They go, oh, yes. In other words, we live in a culture that worships industry and commerce and business. Writers are pleasant entertainment. I think they are much, much more than that. They are the guides. They are the interpreters. They teach us who we are. They make our world more human. They're an incredibly important part of nationhood. And all great nations have had great art at the period of their greatest strength. If you look at Venice in a period of her greatest strength, or Britain at the period of her greatest strength, or the United States, it goes on and on, that you cannot or should not have industrial and economic power without cultural power. And the way that you get cultural power is when the people who have military and economic and industrial power give respect and money to the artists. It's a desperately important mission. It happened in Venice in the 12th century, in Britain in the 19th century, in America in the 20th century, and it needs to happen in Korea in the 21st century. The enormous wealth that has been built up in Korea should no longer just sit in banks, it should be spread to the artists so that the world gets to understand Korea in a way that it currently only understands its industry. You are the ambassadors of the communication of what Korea means into the outside. That's a tremendously important job. Thank you so much. Thank you.
알랭드 보통 씨 강연 잘 들었고요. 아까처럼 앉아서 또 강연을 진행해 보도록 하겠습니다. 대답을 진행해 보도록 하겠습니다. 의자를 좀 준비해 주십시오. 한국에는 몇 번째 방문이신지 좀 궁금한데 오시자마자 바로 트위터로 사진을 찍으셔가지고 이렇게 올리셨더라고요. 자주 오시고 또 올 때마다 느낌은 어떠신지 그럼 궁금합니다.
This is my second time in Korea, and it's always very special to be here. You know, I didn't know very much about Korea until about 10 years ago, when suddenly my books became very popular in this country. And I still don't know why, but I'm immensely grateful. And since then, I've really discovered both Korea as a country and also Koreans as people. What I really like about this country is that people are incredibly open. They have a great sense of humor, and they will tell you quite honestly what they think about things. And this is very, very refreshing. And, you know, I think that this is a country that the best years of this country are still ahead of it. I come from a country where there's often a feeling that the best years are behind. In Korea, you don't feel this. And so it's tremendously energizing. And people are always energetic about something. There's always projects, and people want to do things and get things going. And it's genuinely very, very invigorating to be here.
네, 콘텐츠 창조자로서 저희가 모셨는데 여기 계신 분들도 한국의 콘텐츠 창조자 분들입니다. 혹시 한국의 어떤 콘텐츠를 접해보신 적이 있고 또 어떤 새로운 감흥을 느끼신 적이 있는지 가장 인상적이었던 게 어떤 게 있는지 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
Look, I think it's a shameful thing that Korean literature is very underrepresented in Britain and in the English-speaking world. I have read some books, some novels, particularly that have been translated over recent years. They've often been family dramas and family situations, some very moving, very accomplished, very beautiful, really, about... I think one of the things that this country does very well is an emotion which is very taboo in the UK, and that is sweetness. You guys are very comfortable with sweetness. Sweetness is very often associated with children, with finding, you know, something for a small person, that things are sweet. But there's also an adult version of sweetness. It's linked to kind of tenderness. And it's the ability really to realize that everybody, even a big grown-up with a beard who looks fat and important, is still somewhere inside there is the child. There is someone very vulnerable. And what I find in the Korean art that I've seen is that there is a great sensitivity to sweetness and an ability to engage with it. I think that English and American art is very worried about sentimentality and always tries to do everything to avoid anything that could seem sentimental. I don't see such a fear here, and I think that's a good thing, because the modern world is often too sentimental, too ironic or sarcastic. And I think that's very impressive. I'm also a great fan of older art forms outside of literature. I'm a great fan of Korean ceramics, in which I find great peace and serenity. And I love the way that many great works of Korean ceramics were both religious objects, they were fitted into a religious structure, but they were also household objects. I like that balance between something that is practical and something also that is part of your everyday religion. I think that's beautiful. One of the great sadness, if we're talking about the different art forms of Korea at the moment, is architecture. Seoul, unfortunately, is a very ugly city in many ways. And like many cities of the modern world, it is very ugly. I was speaking to the mayor of Seoul this morning, and I said, you should try and make Seoul the most beautiful city in the world in the next 15 years. I said to him, come on, you can do it. He looked very serious and a bit worried. I said, come on, why couldn't this city be as beautiful as Paris? You know, Paris was hundreds of years ago. Make Seoul the most beautiful city. Anyway, then someone grabbed me and said, oh, the mayor is very busy. So I don't think I was able to finish this comment. But I do think Korean architecture needs to be improved. And I know the history of Korea, obviously things had to be built very fast, etc. But this is now a very rich country. And you guys need some really beautiful architecture, beautiful urban planning, which is kind of lacking.
네. 혹시 한국에서 가보신 곳 중에 좀 가장 마음에 들었었고 이런 도시가 이런 모습으로 좀 남아 있었으면 좋겠는데라고 생각하시는 부분이 있나요? 어떤 동네? 예.
Look, I think my answer is very stereotypical, which is when you get large neighborhoods of vast towers, when each tower is given not a name but a number, you have a problem. You have a problem at the level of individuality. You have the scale is no longer human. And the most attractive parts of Seoul are on a human scale, where the buildings are not. Well, I know we're in a building here with 41 stories, but that's too tall. With all due respect to the makers of this beautiful hotel, 41 levels is too tall. It works sometimes, but it doesn't feel normal on the 41st floor. It feels impressive, but not normal. And I think that we need a Seoul that is low-rise, that is beautifully planned, that is integrated, where the shopping areas are mixed with the working areas. The answers are very simple. I don't want to bore everybody, but I wrote a book about architecture in which I laid out all my views about what a beautiful city should be like. And it's not rocket science. It's relatively simple. But what you need is political will to make human neighborhoods for human beings. And the enemy in all this, I'm afraid, is always the property developer who wants to make a big fortune and sacrifices the lives of millions of people in the process. I think that we should give the highest prize, the Medal of Korea, if you have such a thing, some big prize for any property developer who decides not to make the maximum amount of money and just build something smaller and more beautiful. This person should be given the love of everyone. Everyone should clap as they walk down the street. Many rich people don't really want money. They want honor. They want to be respected. Unfortunately, in our society, the way that people get honor and respect is through money. This is a really big problem. So we should give all the big property developers lots and lots of respect, but ask them to make a little bit less money and create something a little bit more human and low scale, I think.
꼭 그렇게 됐으면 좋겠습니다. 저도. 또 여쭤보고 싶은 게
I'm not going to be invited back, am I?
No,
I'm never going to be. This is it, huh? This is the last visit.
네.
But we're among friends.
네.
Yeah. Okay.
주최한 저희 SBS도 건설사와 함께 이렇게 또 있기 때문에 아마 더 초청을 해주시지 않을까. 앞으로의
okay.
미래를 위해서.
You're right. I will disappear into the ground now.
예. 예. 자, 알랭드 보통씨는 우리가 일상 속에서 접하는 문제를 굉장히 해결할 수 있는 좀 특별한 지혜를 계속 알려주고 싶어 하셨던 것 같은데 특히 행복, 고통 이런 것에 대해서 좀 얘기를 많이 써오셨습니다. 책을 쓰고 어떻게 글을 쓰는 궁극적인 목표가 혹시 행복, 고통 이 사이에 어떤 간극 속에 존재하는 것인지. 네, 통역이 좀 어렵습니다.
Look, my ultimate goal, and this could sound embarrassing, is to help myself. I'm a very troubled, strange human being. And for me, writing is a way of surviving. I find immense consolation and therapeutic benefit in the act of writing. Whenever anything disturbs me, or I'm sad, or troubled, or anxious, and that happens a lot, then I just love reading and writing. I'm just one of those people. I think, you can almost divide human beings into what they do when they are sad. Some people sing, some people go jogging, some people have a bath, some people go shopping. And some people, probably some of you among this room, like to write. Writing is just an immense source of relief and comfort. And I love to lay down my thoughts and my worries and my feelings and make sense of them. I like to control my own thoughts in a text. And I suppose my guess is that other people are like me. Not in every area, but whenever I write, I imagine somebody who is like me. And you know, the greatest joy of being published is realizing that I'm not so alone, because I spent all my time at university, all my university friends. I used to sit down at the table at the university hall of residence, and I would say, you know, guys, what's the meaning of life, and what are we doing, and love, and what does it mean? And they'd all say, oh, shut up. And I was just considered a joke who would all the time just talk too much, think too much, always asking big questions. And then I started writing some books, and they got published. And people started going, oh, how interesting, how special. And my friends from university still think I'm a joke. And they go, oh, you're going to Korea. Bore these poor people about all your stuff. So, well, the great thing about having old friends is they never take you seriously. But that's a good thing. But seriously, I think it's a way of communicating imaginatively with others and helping myself. So it's a form of kind of self-help. That said, you know, when people say, oh, you are wise or wisdom, you know, in most problems of life do not have answers. You know, this is why I hate American self-help books. It's a big generalization. But you know, there's books written by Americans, and they say things like how to have a good sex life in 5 minutes, or how to make $1 million in a week, or whatever. And it's almost like they say, if there's a problem, we will fix it. And my feeling is most problems do not have a solution. But works of art, works of literature, drama, etc., can at least go round the problem and make us feel we're not alone with it, make us understand it. Even if the problem is not removed, we feel better towards it. And it's that I'm interested in. It's that motivates my work.
그 알랭 드 보통 씨의 첫 소설이면서 대표작이 왜 나는 너를 사랑하는가 이건데 제 전 여자친구들도 다 이 책이 가장 좋았었다고 얘기를 했고 나중에 이제 저한테 연락을 해서 이 책을 헤어진 다음에 읽으니까 굉장히 위로가 됐었다 이런 식으로도 얘기했었는데 연애에 대한 어떤 남녀의 심리를 굉장히 독창적이고 아주 흥미롭게 풀어내셨습니다. 이 알랭 드 보통 작가께서 직접 겪은 경험을 혹시 많이 투영하신 건지 그거 궁금해하시는 여성 팬들이 굉장히 많은 걸로 알고 있습니다.
Yes, they are all based. I mean, all I write is autobiography. Now, that doesn't mean to say that if ever I invent a fictional person, that person existed. I like to say that these things are emotionally true. So in other words, you know, I could look at somebody and I could imagine what, you know, one person is doing in their private life, and I could write a story about this. It doesn't mean that that is a true story or that I know that story. It's just emotionally true. And all of you, as screenwriters and other writers, will know what I mean, which is that you invent characters, and if people say, oh, you have just made it up, you want to go, well, it's not, yes, I made it up, but it's true at some emotional level. And it's possible to make up a character and think, that character's not working because they are made up but fake. So there's made up but fake and made up but true. And I think the trick is to find a way of writing about situations that maybe have never happened to you, but that you feel could have done. And I think that's a very, you know, important and interesting thing. I recently wrote a book about sex, a little book about sex. And in it, I describe, I'll never be invited back, but let me say it anyway. There's a concept, I don't know what the Korean translation is, but the concept of a threesome. Threesome. Please. This is, just to explain to members, this is when a couple invites another person to join and have tea together, something like that. Anyway, and people said, oh, have you had many threesomes? I said, no. But I can, of course, understand the dynamics and reflect on the dynamics of the threesome. In other words, you don't have to murder someone in order to write about a murder. You don't have to have a threesome in order to write about a threesome. After all, we are writers, and so we make stuff up, but we make stuff up because we feel we can, because all of our imagination runs ahead of our reality.
네, 그렇습니다. 그리고 이제 여성 팬들이 굉장히 궁금해하는 것인데 그 책 속에서 남자 작가인데 어떻게 이렇게 여성의 심리를 정확하게 알고 있을까? 그리고 또 그거보다 더 앞서 나가는 감성들을 어떻게 또 이렇게 캐치할 수 있을까? 이런 것들 굉장히 가장 궁금해하는 부분이거든요.
Look, I am the opposite. I'm afraid this is a problem sometimes, particularly if a gangster were to come in here. I'm not a very macho man. I mean, I would run away immediately. I would leave you to deal with the gangster, and I would hide and start crying. So I'm a bit of a girly guy, heterosexual but girly. I don't know. I grew up with a sister. My closest friend as a child was my sister. We were very close in age. And it never really occurred to me to think that she was a girl and I was a boy. We were just like friends. And I've always had that sort of sense that women are not, the enemy or a strange species. I mean, I know men, in England, many people go to boarding school, all men boarding schools. And even today, if you meet a man who's been at all men boarding school, a woman comes in the room and they get all nervous and they don't know how to behave, and this feels very strange. I don't feel that. I've always been comfortable around women, and I'm also, from a narrative, from a fiction point of view, more interested in women because women are more emotional. I mean, to be a man is on the whole to try and hide your emotions, to be macho. And machismo is not just a problem in daily life, it's a problem in creative life. Because it's very hard to create male characters who do things like cry and feel self-doubt and look for meaning. Male characters, they're always hitting a wall rather than talking. They're always jogging rather than talking. They're drinking themselves to death rather than having a crisis that you can observe. So for me, I've always found it more difficult to deal with male characters. Simply more of male behavior is under the surface.
그렇군요. 책에서도 그렇고 뭐 TV 드라마 같은 방송에서도 많은 작가분들 또 콘텐츠를 만드는 분들이 다루는 소재는 역시 사랑입니다. 알랭 드 보통식의 또 여성분들 굉장히 궁금해하는 부분인데 사랑이란 뭐라고 생각하시는지. 이게 뭐 그냥 스트레오타입 질문이기도 하지만 혹은 한국에 오셨을 때 아니면 이 자리에서 또 사랑이란 생각이 어떻게 바뀌셨는지 뭐 그런 것도 좀. 아까 그 얘기 때문에 여쭤보는 건 절대 아닙니다.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, and sadly, my thoughts on love in Korea only arrived yesterday, have not yet developed, although I would love them to. But more seriously, what is love? I think that it goes in stages, it goes in phases. And the first phase of love is the discovery of another human being who seems incredibly lovely. It's a feeling that you have located. Most people we see don't appeal to us. And then very occasionally, 1 in 100, you'll see someone and something about what they say or how they look or how they are makes you feel that they are a good person, a beautiful person. And you feel tremendously excited just that they exist. And if they notice you, well, this is an even better situation. And you are at the birth of a love story. Now, it has to be said that most of the love stories in films and in novels are really just about this. They are about someone finding someone else lovely and then some conflict stopping the love from developing. So the most classic one is, Romeo and Juliet. Romeo loves Juliet, Juliet loves Romeo, but there's a family problem. It's a classic thing, and we've had a million versions of Romeo and Juliet. Or, Anna Karenina, the great 19th century Russian novel. Anna, beautiful Anna, is married, but to a boring husband. She doesn't love the husband, but she meets somebody else who she really loves, and he seems wonderful, but she can't get together with him because she's married. So there is always the love and then the obstacle to love. This is where life and art actually have differences, because most of the time in our lives, there isn't so much conflict to love. I mean, There might be a time when, the boy loves the girl loves the boy, and they don't know, and they lose the number, and then they find each other again, and then they meet in the cafeteria. But eventually, they will get together, and they can start having a relationship. Now, this is when the problems start. And this is also where, as a writer, the problems start, because it's not very exciting anymore. Because boy loves girl, maybe they're married, nothing much is going on, and yet still there are problems. And our imagination is not good at dealing with this. There are very few works of art that successfully deal with day-to-day love. If you want one example, the wonderful, it was originally made for Swedish television in the 1970s by the great Swedish filmmaker Ingmar Bergman, and it's called Scenes from a Marriage. It's a soap opera, it's like a mini-series about a married couple. And it's brilliant because it shows you an ordinary married couple who are ordinarily in love, not madly in love, they just like each other, and then some problems happen. Not massive problems, but small problems, and then the problems become a bit larger, and it's sad but not dramatic. Anyway, it's one example of a great work about love that doesn't simply concentrate on the beginning of love. And I think, to come back to myself, the great challenge is not how to find someone great on day one. The great challenge is, how do you find someone great on day 4,000? That's really the challenge. And I would challenge you to try and make some art around that. That's a really interesting challenge. Not boy meets girl, but girl is busy, or girl meets boy, but boy has a girlfriend at the moment, and they're trying to work it out. But no, boy and girl have moved in together, and they're living together, and it's year 4, and they have an argument about what kind of toothpaste to buy, and that he wants to go out later in the evening, and she doesn't like his friends, and they have a terrible argument, and one person insults the other. That's love too, but we're not very good at making art out of that.
그렇습니다. 아까 예술이 필요한 이유에 대해서 스스로를 이해하기 위해서, 나를 좀 더 잘 알기 위해서라고 말씀하셨는데, 5번째로 말씀하셨던 거, 혹시 쓰신 작품을 한국에 계신 팬들이나 아니면 뭐 다른 곳에 있는 팬들, 나보다 더 잘 안다고 이렇게 반응을 해준 것들을 접한 적 있으신가요? 어떤 팬 레터를 통해서든가 어떤 감상을 통해서든가 나보다 더 잘 알고 또 새롭게 느꼈던 그런 반응을 들은 적 있으신지?
Sure, yes, and it's very touching and it's very moving that they have said that. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to understand myself better, and if I've understood myself better, the hope is that I might have understood you. And of course, this is the mystery of writing, that and that's why writing is underpinned by a universal human nature. That's why you can read a novel written in the 18th century in France, and it makes sense in Korea today, because human beings, under the surface differences, are the same. And that's why if you are a good student of yourself, you should be able to be a good student of others. You should guess what other people are like by studying yourself very well. And it's almost mysterious, but it's not really mysterious. It's just that our psychology is universal.
그렇습니다. 이 불안이라는 책을 보면 우리의 자아가 바람이 새는 풍선 같다 이렇게 표현을 한 적이 있으신데, 혹시 알랭 드 보통 씨도 그 작가라는 직업에서 벗어나서 아까도 뭐 깽이 들어오면 약간 겁이 날 수도 있다 이렇게 말씀하셨는데, 불안이라는 거를 느끼신 적이 있으신지, 또 불안을 벗어나려면 어떤 것들을 하시는지 궁금하네요.
Yeah. Of course I felt status anxiety. I feel it every day, and that's why when I wrote that book, Status Anxiety, I was very keen to say I and we throughout. No, sorry, I was very keen to say we throughout. If I said I, then people would say, it's just him. He's got that terrible disease, status anxiety. If I said you, it would suggest it's just you and not me. But I used the word we throughout. In other words, all of us. All of us are in the same boat. All of us suffer from status anxiety. And, there's no total solution to this. But again, there's a real consolation to be found in discovering that we all suffer from this private thing. The other day I was at a dinner with some people some very powerful business people. and I was brought along as the entertainment. And I said, because it was late in the evening, I said, listen, all men, very serious with ties. And I said, guys, what are you afraid of? Like, what's your real fear? And the first guy said, you know, I'm really scared of disappointing my father. I said, oh, how old is your father? He said, oh, my father's been dead 20 years. I said, oh, so you're afraid of disappointing your father, but he's been dead 20 years. He said, yes, I know it's strange, but that's how I live. The next one said, I'm afraid of disappointing my son. I said, how old is your son? 5. I said, oh, right, well, you must be the hero to him. He said, no, but I'm afraid that one day I will disappoint him. Another one said he was afraid of disappointing his boss. Another one of disappointing his wife. And I felt like saying that we should all start crying together because it was so sad. It was so sad that these were very accomplished, hardworking, noble people who were being driven crazy by a terrible fear of being losers, being disappointments, and they all felt very, very alone. It was totally surprising to them that anyone else felt this way, and it was a very moving moment. And I think that's what works of art should do. I mean, this was a little moment around a dinner table, but that's what a work of art should do. A work of art should help us to realize that all of us are scared and frightened and terrified of failure and terrified of disappointing our loved ones and of ruining our lives and of, disappointing people that we love and are bringing up. This is universal, but we don't talk about it. When we meet, we just say, hi, how are you? Great, how are you? And so we're lonely. And so long as we find it hard to say the truth to ourselves and to our friends and to those around us, there will be a very important space and a very important job for literature to do.
네, 알랭드 보통 씨가 지난 2008년에 굉장히 새로운 활약을 보여주셨는데 런던 도심 한복판에 인생학교라는 어른들을 위한 학교를 열었습니다. 그래서 지인들과 만든 이 프로젝트 학교가 뭐 직접 강의도 많이 하시고 또 토론도 하고 또 인생을 좀 의미 있게 사는 법 이런 걸 알려주면서 뜨거운 호응을 얻어냈는데요. 인생학교를 열게 된 어떤 취지 그리고 그 인생학교를 통해서 궁극적으로 바라는 건 어떤 것인지 여쭤보고 싶네요.
I got bored of sitting at home all day just by myself, and I wanted to work with other people. And so I thought, why not take many of the things I care about in my books and put them in an institution, a little institution. So we started this thing called the School of Life, and there we run all sorts of projects. We have therapy, psychotherapy on offer. Normally in Britain, if you say you are seeing a psychotherapist, people go, oh, I'm so sorry, and they think you're crazy. It shouldn't be the way. Psychotherapy is a fantastic way of understanding yourself. It's a form of applied philosophy. Everyone in this room, has anyone in this room done psychotherapy? Anyone put up their hand? Okay, few people. It's great, isn't it? It's fantastic. We should all do it. Everyone should do it. I've done it. Everyone should do it. It's a fantastic way of understanding yourself, particularly if you're a creative person. Really, it's great. So we offer psychotherapy. We offer group classes in which we talk about things like death and anxiety and the meaning of life, etc. Every night of the week in London, we have things going on in our little headquarters. If ever any of you are in London and you have a bit of time, come down. We always have someone from Korea in the audience. And we make them feel very welcome and they have a great time. So please come. And it's just a little space where we can teach and educate and learn. We have a wonderful bookshop. And we do all sorts of things. We've made some films, we've made some books together, etc. So it's a place for friends to do what I love doing and to make it a bit more powerful in the world. We would love to start the School of Life in Korea. I'm going to try and do this. My year's plan this year is I'm going to try and find somebody in Korea who knows how to run a school, a little school. It's not a school for children, it's like an adult school, who knows how to run that school. And I want to try and identify this person, and I want to get them to make the School of Life in Korea, because I think it could be interesting here. I'd certainly love it. It would give me more reason to come here. So if any of you in the audience know anyone who wants to run the School of Life in Korea, let me know. You can email me. I've got a website, alaindebotton.com. You could just drop me an email if you know anyone who, but they would have to know really how to organize things practically, like how to run a team of teachers, and they have to know about money, and they have to know about the law, and they have to know about coffee and how you sell it, and books. It's a very practical kind of job. Anyway, anyone who's got those skills, this is a job advertisement.
지금까지 알랭 리보팅 작가의 삶과 철학에 대해서 여쭤봤는데 이번에는 작가분들이 오셨으니까 창작 노하우에 대해서 좀 여쭤보고 싶습니다. 좀 독특한 소재 그리고 그걸 다루는 어떤 창조적인 아이디어, 터치 이런 것들은 어디서 이제 영감을 많이 얻으시는지요?
Look, I think a few tips really. I mean, every writer has them. I think that no one is born with the full idea of the completed work. You know, sometimes non-writers think that you just sit and you write page one and off you go. Works of art are born in our minds as fragments, tiny fragments of what will one day be a whole pot. It's almost as though there's a pot, it gets broken, we find little pieces, and we have to try and reimagine the full pot. And we find pieces in a lot of chaos. And so what we need to do, I think, very patiently is accumulate each broken piece and put it on a table and look at it and think about it and think, okay, is that a bit about the beginning, or is that at the end, or is that in the middle, or is that in this person's voice or that person's voice? So in other words, it will come out of your imagination chaotically. And you have to give yourself time to find the order. I find that the order comes last and the moments of emotion and inspiration come first. And you need the two. So give yourself time to collect the little broken fragments of inspiration and then look for the form. But you will only find the form once you've got a big pile of fragments. In order to look for those fragments, always keep a lookout for them every day, every minute. There's a friend of mine who's a screenwriter, and she says that there's something called a writer's stare. And it goes like this. You're with a dinner with friends, and they're all talking about holidays and things, and everybody's having a good time, and suddenly you're like this. And somebody goes, hey, what's going on? And what's going on is you've had an idea. You've had an idea. And really, you want to leave the table and write it down because it's such a good idea, but you can't. You're just staring. And my advice is leave the table. Say, I'm sorry, I'm a writer, something's come up. And you just leave the table and you write it down because it will be gone the next minute. Our minds do not hold on to information very well. So grab onto it. Another tip is don't despair. The first time that you write something, it looks appalling, terrible. And, you know, the thing is that we always look at the work of art of other people when it's finished, right? And so we think, oh, I'm trying to be a writer and I've just written this absolute nonsense. But look at the books of Alain de Botton. They look so polished and, you know, accomplished. Or look at the films of Ingmar Bergman or whoever it is, you know. And the truth is that at the beginning, it's a complete mess. It's so embarrassing. It's so bad. But you don't show anyone and you don't despair. You just have the confidence to say, I know it's terrible, but I can get this better. Not even tonight or tomorrow, but at some point I will try and get it better. And I think at the beginning, it's very easy to panic. You go, it's not right now, so I'll throw it in the bin and I'll go off and do something else. Be calm. The last tip, I think, is use the night. Night is a very important part of the writer's life. When you go to sleep, the unconscious works out a lot of problems. Before you go to sleep, turn over a problem. Let's say you can't fix a scene, or you've got a problem in a character or something. Think about it at night, and then the answer may be there in the morning. Not always, but surprisingly often, it can be there in the morning. So use the night. Also, use the middle of the night to write, because it's very hard to write when everybody else is awake. Other people get in one's headspace. If you have the pressure, you know, 9 o'clock on Monday morning is a terrible time to try and write. But in the middle of the night, you think, it doesn't matter if I mess up. I couldn't sleep, and I'm not reading a magazine, but I'm going to try a little bit of writing. At that moment, your pressure is low, and you have a better chance, I think, of finding a good way.
혹시 밤에 이렇게 집중해서 썼던 것들이 다음날 아침에 혹은 낮에 다시 봤을 때 좀 이게 좋지 않게 느껴졌다거나 그런 것에 대한 수정이라든가 그런 걸 어떻게 해야 될까요?
When they look worse in the morning, give it time. You know, give it time. Don't panic. Have faith that it can get better. I think many people want it to be done immediately, and it takes time.
그렇습니다. 그 작가로서의 일상생활도 굉장히 여쭤보고 싶은데 제가 듣기로는 마치 공무원처럼 거의 매일 일정한 시간에 글을 20년 넘게 쓰셨다고 들었습니다. 그렇게 할 수 있는 어떤 관리라던가 주변 환경도 좀 여건이 조성이 돼야 될 것 같거든요. 그리고 그런 것들을 다른 작가들에게도 추천하고 싶은 방식이신지 여쭤보고 싶네요.
No, I mean, it's interesting. I find that I try to keep regular hours, but inspiration has its own timetable. And, you know, it just comes whenever. I mean, I worked out a bit of my next novel just as the plane was going to take off yesterday as I was coming here at Heathrow Airport as we were on the runway. And I suddenly started grabbing for a piece of paper, and the stewardess said, well, what are you doing? I said, no, I just have to write something down. And because I don't know why, it was just a really good moment. Inspiration comes at strange moments. So yes, by all means, keep regular hours, try and keep a good schedule, but at the same time, be ready to be surprised at very strange moments. So give room for the unexpected.
네. 사실 20년 넘게 활동을 해오셨는데 집필하면서 굉장히 어려움을 느꼈다거나 고통스러웠다거나 아니면 나는 지금 슬럼프에 진입한 것 같다 이렇게 생각한 적은 없으셨는지. 사실 창작을 하시는 분들은 항상 좋은 시절이 있는가 하면 또 굉장히 어려운 시절도 많이 겪거든요.
Yeah, I've often been in despair. Normally every few months I say, okay, I'm finishing with writing. I'm never going to write again. It's finished. And normally it's a good friend of mine who says, oh, are you having the bakery moment? And the bakery moment is my fantasy that I will stop writing and open a bakery, a small bakery, and I will sell bread. And this is such a nice fantasy because, you know, the worry with writing is, does it help anyone? And the great thing about bread is, you know, it will help people because everybody wants to eat bread, needs to eat bread. So I have this fantasy of running a small bakery. So yes, very often I'm close to despair. And it's extraordinary that I'm still writing books after all these years. After every book I finish, I think, oh, never again. But, you know, you keep going. So yes, my life is full of crisis. And I do wish that I'd been born a more normal person. I mean, I feel sorry for everybody in this room. All of you in this room have felt the desire to write. And it's a terrible desire. It messes up your financial life. It messes up your personal life. It makes you a nervous, depressed human being, excitable, but also sad sometimes. It's a terrible curse. And, you know, I think I mean, it's a real problem. Whenever I meet a young person, they say, oh, I want to be a writer. I think, oh, no, I'm so sorry. Are you sure you don't want to be an engineer? And they go, no, I find engineering so boring. I want to be a writer. I think, oh, God, I'm so sorry. So, you know, it's a painful task. There are so many better ways to live. But I think the way to look at it is we don't really have a choice. We have been driven to writing by neurosis and mental illness, in a way, all of us. And so we just have to live with it. And it's sad, but it would definitely be easier to be an engineer.
그렇습니다. 혹시 글을 쓰지 않으셨으면 어떤 일을 하고 싶으셨는지 그런 것 있었는지 궁금하고 또 문학을 하시지 않을 때 쓰기 전에 어떻게 하시는 건 없는지.
I would love to have become an architect, fascinated by architecture, and I would love to have done that. But I never did anything else. Strangely, I really fell into writing. I wrote my first book, Essays in Love, when I was 22, and I've just carried on ever since. And maybe that's a bit unhealthy, but there we are. I think, you know, in a way, the advantage is that if you start young, you don't have the risk of giving up an established job, and, you know, maybe if you have a family or something, that can be very risky to leave all of that for writing. So I started writing when I was still, you know, young enough not to have to risk too much. And I feel lucky about that.
고맙습니다. 그럼 이제 제가 미리 취합했던 질문은 그만하고 청중 여러분께서 작가 여러분께서 질문하는 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다.
I have 3 questions for you, but I'll try to make it quick. First of all, what is the reason the Western literature is dry and sarcastic? You said earlier that the American and Western literature tend to be less sweet than Korean literature. What do you think is the reason? Does it have to do with their culture, or do they just lack the ability to be sweet? Second of all, are all self-help books useless? Do you see any value in them, or do you think they're just waste of ink and paper? Third of all, what is your greatest fear in life?
Well, so to answer about sweetness, I think that art makes things popular in a society. In other words, if you have good examples of sweet art, sweetness will become more popular, and it becomes self-confirming, a virtuous circle. So I think Korea has had art that has reflected sweetness and done it well, and so sweetness has become more acceptable, so there's been more art about sweetness. And I think, maybe other countries have not had that. So I think it's a positive circle of feedback that's happened here. You ask about self-help. I think that self-help books can be good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a book that tries to help you to live. That is a very beautiful idea. The problem is when these books try a little bit too hard to suggest that there is no problem, that every problem has a solution, and that solution comes instantly. So I like self-help books that are a little bit dark, that are pessimistic, that are sad. And, in a way, all great works of literature are self-help books. Shakespeare is writing self-help in a way, in the biggest sense. So I think we need to play with that word self-help. It doesn't just have to mean that thing with a pink cover written by an American author. It can be a lot of other things too. I think I fear, there's so much that I fear. Failure, catastrophe, the death of people I love, disappointing myself, disappointing others, all of the things that one fears. Life is very, very frightening. And the thing is, all of us are going to fail in some area, in a big way. No one reaches the age of 70 or 80 without some big, big regrets. And we have to be ready for that. And religion used to make us ready. When Buddha tells us life is suffering, I think that's beautiful. It's very true. Of course life is suffering. But the message from the United States is, life is beautiful. What are you going to do today to make your life perfect? Well, we can't make life perfect. And we need reminders from Buddha and other people that it's not perfectible. We are not capable of being perfect. And we need to know that.
또 질문해 주실 분 계신가요? 네, 앞쪽에 마이크 부탁드립니다.
You just mentioned that our life is unperfectible. I do have that thought very often, and it leads me into depression, actually. So at the moment, I'm trying to figure out how I can get out of that depression when I realize that life is actually a lot of suffering.
I think that certainly the intellectual answer, I think depression has many reasons, some of which are emotional. But to give you the intellectual answer, I think you can't wait for life to begin you can't wait for everything to be perfect before you begin your own life. In other words, we have to have modest projects. We have to have moments when we think, life is imperfect, but I will make a beautiful garden. And I can't change the whole field. I can't change the whole nation, but I can make a beautiful garden. And that's in many ways what works of art are. They're little, beautiful gardens. They are not everything. They are not the whole of society. And sometimes you think, well, the rest of society is such a mess. What's the point of doing my beautiful garden? Well, on a good day, your beautiful garden will help other people. So I think work with the imperfectible. There's a wonderful psychoanalyst I like reading called Donald Winnicott, an English psychoanalyst who was writing in the 50s. And there was a lot of pressure at that time about being a mother, being a good mother, and the perfect mother. And how could you be the perfect mother? and there's a lot of tension around people. And he wrote a famous essay called The Good Enough Mother. The Good Enough Mother. And he basically said, it doesn't matter if you're not perfect. The challenge is to be good enough. And the good enough mother is still okay. So we are sometimes used to believing that only the best will do. And this can lead us to despair. And so I think in order to achieve anything, we have to allow that we can do something that's good enough. Good enough. Not perfect, but good enough. And maybe that's enough for us, and enough to get us out of bed, making the first steps towards something.
그 앞에 계신 분 질문 받겠습니다.
저는 작가로서의 보통시도 좋지만 참 한 사람의 철학자로 많이 느껴집니다. 그래서 작품 속에서 나오는 그 이야기를 보면서 어떻게 저런 인생에 대한 통찰력을 얻을 수 있을까 감동을 많이 받는데요. 그런 보통시가 통찰력을, 인생에 대한 통찰력을 얻는 방법이나 노하우가 있으면 알려주시면 감사하겠습니다.
I think there is no magical solution to finding wisdom. I mean, some people say, where is wisdom to be found? Is it in this book or that book, etc.? You have to hunt around. And, my bookshelf is full of books where I was really inspired by maybe a few sentences. Many books are very boring, but sometimes one finds just a little bit of something one can use. And then all of us are in the business of reading other people's work and stealing from them and creating our own wisdom, our own meaning. No one can do it for you. And that's why, it was once, Virginia Woolf was once asked why she wrote books. And she replied very nicely, I think. She said, because I've never read a book which says everything I want it to say. So almost like other people's books are not perfect. And that's what inspired her to try and write her own books. That said, I passionately believe in education in wisdom. I do feel that each generation can teach each new generation certain things about life and love and meaning, and that's why I write books, that's why I started the School of Life. We can learn some of these things. You don't have to make all the same mistakes all over again every single generation. And I think this is a point that we understand well enough in science. I mean, when it comes to educating ourselves in science, no one would say, just find out for yourself what temperature boils at, and find out, the theory of relativity on your own. It would be accepted that somebody else has found it out, and therefore you read their books or go to their classes, and then you you don't waste so much time. When it comes to wisdom, to the area of life, you sometimes hear people say things like, oh, you can't teach young people about love, or no one really knows what makes a good career. And you think, no, that can't be true. Surely there are some things that you can learn and study and teach a new generation. So my answer is really, on the one hand, yes, you need to do some things for yourself, but on the other hand, other generations have been there before, and we can learn an awful lot by reading their books, seeing their films, and going to talk to them.
네, 대답이 되셨으면 좋겠고요. 또 질문하실 분 계십니까? 네. 중간에 계신 남자분 먼저 손 드셨기 때문에 한번 해보겠습니다.
예, 아까 그 예술의 7가지, 예술이 왜 필요한가에 대해서 7가지로 말씀을 해주셨고, 또 그 이후에 지나친 상업성에 물드는 사회에 대해서 경계도 하시고 계시다고 말씀도 하셨습니다. 근데 저희가 대부분 드라마를 공부하거나 현업 드라마 작가를 하시는 분들이기 때문에 이 드라마라는 장르는 예술의 아까 말씀하신 그 7가지의 가치를 추구하면서도 상업성을 외면할 수 없는 현실에 놓여 있습니다. 이러한 상황에서도 불구하고 드라마라는 장르를 예술로 분류할 수 있다고 생각하시는지, 또 그렇다면 예술로 분류할 수 있다면 이 드라마가 예술로서의 가치를 인정받아 나가기 위해서 어떠한 방향으로 나아가야 한다고 생각하시는지 그 의견을 묻고 싶습니다.
Well, I'm very interested in a subset of drama which is called tragedy. And tragedy is in a way the beginning of drama, and it starts in the 5th century BC in Athens when the first plays are performed, the first dramatic productions. And I'm sure you know this, but let me say it anyway. The first dramas, first tragedies, always have the same kind of structure. They follow somebody who is quite high-born, quite economically prosperous, a nobleman, a king, a wealthy merchant, someone who's kind of established in their society. They're neither particularly good nor particularly bad. They're a kind of ordinary person, morally, and then they make some kind of little mistake. Something goes a bit wrong, and suddenly their whole life collapses. Everything goes wrong, and they are involved in what the Greeks called a tragedy. Now, if you think about that, now the interesting thing is that the philosopher Aristotle wrote wonderfully about tragedy. And what he said about tragedy is tragedy makes Athens, the city, better. He recommended that the city would go to tragedies and by watching tragedies would come away improved, that there is a kind of purpose to watching tragedy. Tragedy makes you a better person. Watching a tragedy makes you a better person. Now, why did he say this? What's going on here? Well, what he was trying to teach us is that very often when you see somebody else ruining their life, let's say they've married the wrong person or their business has gone bust or they've lost everything because they've said something stupid, etc. It's very easy to go, oh, what an idiot, what a loser, what a bad person. But when you look at the story through the eyes of tragedy, through the eyes of a good dramatist, what you see is that you can start to understand everyone, even people who you thought you couldn't understand. You can have sympathy for the murderer. You can have sympathy for the bad person. The so-called bad person emerges as another human being. And this really educates us to be less moralistic, less judgmental. It makes us kinder towards others and more scared for ourselves because we think maybe I could have been that. Maybe I would have done that. If I'd been in his shoes, I might have done the same thing. So I think the most powerful kinds of drama make us more human. And you talk about the tension between, big box office success and, art. I think that the best dramas are both commercial and emotional successes because they've put their finger on something deeply exciting, on a real tension in human nature. And that's why people want to watch them. And, it's very hard to pull off, but the best kind of drama could be both. It could be both popular and on a very important territory.
네, 아까 사랑은 상대의 아름다움 발견하는 것이라고 하셨는데 지금의 아내분은 어떻게 만나셔서 그 아름다움 발견하셨는지 개인적으로 궁금해서 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
I met her in very ordinary circumstances. We were introduced by friends, and I was struck by her dignity, her quiet reserve, her very dry sense of humor, a certain sadness, and certain sensitivity. She thought I was very strange and didn't like me at all, but I kept persevering. And this was a long time ago now. This was 11 years ago. And, I find it hard to remember who we both were at that time. We are now not in the first phase of love. We're way, way down the phase. And that said, I think you never really stop learning about the other person. There are still new things that I learn about her and she learns about me. We're still learning how to live together. I think it's very hard to live with another person. And we're still learning how to make each other happy. And I used to think that marriage was a kind of dead state, that all of life is dramatic, romantic life is dramatic. And then you get married, and then peace, and harmony, and quiet, no drama of any kind. And I realized that's not true. Emotional life is just as vivid and vibrant and exciting and sometimes upsetting as it ever was. And so, it goes on. I think marriage is a very, very difficult thing. It means living with somebody else so closely. And I think most of us don't know how to live with ourselves. And most of us still have to improve at being good people, you know? Most of us are not very mature psychologically, and we're not necessarily very good. And we are complicated creatures. We want so many different things. We want stability and excitement. We want reassurance, but we want drama. We want coziness, but we want, you know, something more vivid as well. So we want so many different things. And we have this institution which we call marriage. And it's designed to hold all of these needs together. But, you know, as dramatists, you know that there is so much material there. There are so many ways in which there can be problems, tensions, projects, excitements, etc. So marriage is by no means a dead state. It is a state of high drama, particularly for me.
네. 네, 또 질문하실 분 계신가요?
예, 저는 조언을 얻고 싶은데요. 어떻게 보면 저도 제 불안에서 벗어나기 위한 질문일 수 있는데 저는 20년째 평균적으로 일주일에 5시간만 잠을 잡니다. 근데 어느 날 잠을 자게 되면 장시간 잠을 자게 되면 되게 디테일한 꿈을 꾸게 됩니다. 어떤 날은 이제 뭐 미로가 많은 건물에서 뭐 살인 사건이 일어나서 그 문제를 해결한다거나 전혀 모르는 역사에 일어난다거나 그냥 영화나 드라마 같은 것들이 펼쳐져서 그것들을 항상 적고 이거를 엮어놨는데 사실 이게 남들이 생각할 때 정말 쟤는 작가니까 저게 지어낸 얘기는 아닐지 정말 제 꿈이라고 생각을 안 할 수도 있으니까 그래서 이거를 어떻게 풀까 좀 많은 고민을 하는데 이것들을 잘 엮을 수 있는 방법 그러니까 제 예술을 남들에게 좀 이해시킬 수 있는 좋은 방법이 있다면 무엇이 있을지 그런 조언을 좀 얻고 싶습니다.
Well, I think other people's dreams are some of the most boring stories one can ever hear. You know, if somebody says, I had a really exciting dream last night, you always think, oh no. It's very weird. We feel lonely with our dreams because they are very, very exciting and personal to us, but they really don't translate for other people because their meaning is private. And I think that there are correspondences between dreams and works of art. But in a way, they are also opposite. I think a good writer makes something that maybe seems like a dream, but is actually very real and very not boring at all. And that requires a lot of conscious effort. So I think your dreams are the raw material, potentially, of art, but they are not art in themselves. There needs to be, you can't simply write down your dream and expect that it will be art. Art has to go through so much more work. It could be the beginning of art, a moment of art, but it is not art in itself. Again, I love psychoanalysis, and as we know, psychoanalysis is all about the analysis of dreams. I think that dreams are full of meaning. Very often we don't know what they mean. We cannot understand ourselves. But if you go to a psychotherapist or a psychoanalyst, you can discuss your dream, and your dream can start to make sense within the context of your life. I think that dreams are a way of discharging anxiety. They are a relief from anxiety. Often we don't understand what we are anxious about because the anxiety is so frightening. If we were to realize what we were scared of, we couldn't face up to it. So a dream is a kind of compromise. It makes you a bit aware of what you're scared of, but not so aware that you would go crazy. So it gives you a partial insight. I think it's very important to move that partial insight to a whole insight. And I think you need probably to visit somebody like a psychotherapist to discuss the dream and to discuss your whole life within the context of that dream. I think what we're facing is you don't understand yourself well enough. You can't understand what's happening to you. You are visited by these dreams, almost like one would be visited by a ghost, but you don't know what they are. They're very powerful. They're upsetting. They take over your life. You can't sleep. You need someone who can help, who can take care of you, who will have the patience to analyze what might be going on. So I'm very biased because I have such good experiences of psychotherapy, but I would really recommend thinking about that, particularly because your concern is dreams, and psychotherapy is built around the analysis of dreams. That's how it started.
네, 굉장히 마음속 깊숙한 곳에서 이게 질문을 갖고 계셨던 분들도 많은 것 같은데 어떤 거든 좋습니다. 그동안 책을 많이 읽으시면서 또 그동안의 활동들을 보시면서 궁금하셨던 것들은 어떤 것이든 후회 없이 질문해 주셨으면 좋겠습니다. 네, 앞에 계신 분께 좀 부탁드릴게요.
안녕하세요. 팬입니다. 제가 제일 처음에 접했던 왜 나는 너를 사랑하는가 그 책을 읽었을 때요. 사실 보고 좀 되게 질투를 많이 느꼈던 부분이 어떤 부분이었냐면요. 그 클로이의 그 치아를 보면서 그 말했던 플라톤적 치아, 그다음에 칸트적 치아라는 표현이 있었어요. 근데 그걸 보면서 아니 어떻게 이런 글을 쓸 수가 있을까 되게 질투난다 막 이러면서 읽었던 기억이 있거든요. 근데 사실은 그 저희들이 그 보통시를 되게 좋아하는 가장 큰 이유 중에 하나가 지적인 유희를 되게 잘 표현하신다는 건데요. 그런 것들을 저희들이 글에 잘 녹여내기 위해서는 물론 독서도 되게 많이 해야 되고 공부도 많이 해야겠지만 그런 표현들을 만들어내기 위한 특별한 본인만의 어떤 비법이라던가 방법이 있으신지 좀 그게 궁금했거든요.
Intellectual play. I mean, sometimes people say, oh, your books are quite funny. I never try to be funny. I never say, now I'm going to write a funny book or whatever. I just try and go to the truth. And I think if you try and go to the truth, sometimes funny things will happen along the way. If you're really honest about most things, you start to feel that it's funny because it's so absurd and it's so sad. If you put a microphone inside a couple who was going to kiss for the first time, it would instantly be a comedy, right? If you put a microphone, because he will be thinking, oh, is she ready? And he will be thinking, come on, what's he doing? Oh, maybe I don't have my lipstick on properly. And he'll be thinking, I hope she doesn't do anything dramatic if I move towards her, etc. So it's funny because it's honest to what actually goes on. Most of what we are is kind of absurd. And I think writers have to be just honest with themselves about their own truth. And quite soon they will start making jokes because it just ends up funny. I think the enemy of all writing is cliche. And cliche is just people not remembering what things are actually like. And the opposite of a cliche is just honesty with yourself. I wrote a book about the airport. I wrote a book about Heathrow Airport. I was asked to write a book about Heathrow Airport a few years ago. And in that book, I remember a moment when I wrote that when you are pushing your trolley through the arrival area, when you've got your luggage, and you're arriving you've gone through customs, you open the gates, and suddenly there are all the people waiting. Even if you know that no one is waiting for you, your parents are gone away or dead, or you have no partner, you have no friends, or no one's asked to pick you up, etc. As you go through, you look at everybody's face and you just maybe hope that someone is there anyway. Maybe your mother, even if she died 10 years ago, is there. Maybe your friend has come to surprise you. Maybe your wife is going to play some trick on you and has arrived or something. And I wrote this and I thought it was only true for me. I wrote it because it was very honest to me. That's how I feel. When I push my trolley through an airport, I always think somebody may come. Now, this is embarrassing in a way because it suggests that I am not a narcissist, that I think, oh, everybody's coming to see me. And of course they don't. Why would they? But there's a small part of us, all of us, I think, that is like a small child that is hoping that maybe my mummy and daddy have come to see me or something. Anyway, I wrote this in my book, and lots of people said, oh, I love that bit where you describe how you come with the trolley, because I have felt that. Now, I didn't know they felt that. I simply knew I felt that, and I tried to be very honest about how I felt. Now, as a writer of, what would be a cliche description? A cliche description would be, the narrator comes back from, arrives at the airport, gets his luggage, and as he's coming out, he's thinking about how he's going to find the train or the bus to go into the center of town. That's like that would be the kind of cliched version. The non-cliched version is the narrator comes through with his suitcase and he thinks his mother might be there, right? That's kind of crazy, but not cliched, and it's true. And I think a lot of good writing is about allowing yourself to be a bit weird sometimes, to just take a risk and to say normal life is not how it's been described in bad art. Good art reminds us of how things really are, and things really are a little bit weird. A little bit weird. Things are not the way they should be. You know, at a funeral, you should be sad. But actually, sometimes you're a bit bored, or you're thinking about hunger, or you're kind of glad the person died. Or, you know, this kind of thing. Life is full of these little moments, and I think good writers are alive to them and pull them out and are honest enough with themselves and trust that the audience will trust them if they put it in the drama.
네. 또 보통 씨의 작품을 읽으면서 많은 분들이 또 질투를 느끼셨을 작가분들도 좀 많을 것 같습니다. 네, 저쪽에 계신 분 질문 받아보겠습니다.
두 가지 질문을 좀 드리고 싶은데요. 하나는 보통 씨의 책을 읽다 보면은 훈계까지는 아니지만 작가 자신이 알고 있는 그런 것들을 독자한테 뭔가 이렇게 설명하고 하나라도 더 알려주려고 막 노력하는 것 같은 그런 느낌을 받습니다. 그래서 여러 군데서 그런 느낌을 제가 읽으면서 받았기 때문에 혹시 어떤 계몽주의적 강박 같은 게 있는 게 아닌가 그런 생각이 좀 들었어요. 그래서 좀 궁금한데 보통 씨께서 작가로서 글을 쓰는 그 궁극의 목적이 뭔지, 그러니까 왜 글을 쓰는지가 좀 궁금하고요. 다른 하나는 뭐 그냥 격가지로 간단히 말씀드려보자면 책에 많은 책을 다 본 거는 아니지만 많은 책들에서 이제 번호를 매겨가면서 글들을 써내려 가신 걸 볼 수 있었는데 그게 어떤 그런 글쓰기 방식이 어떤 사고를 정리한다든지 어떤 이런 특별한 작가 자신의 어떤 독특한 습관에 의한 건지 아니면은 출판사에서 어떤 출판사의 조언에 의해서 그런 식으로 정리를 하신 건지 좀 궁금합니다.
Okay. To come to your first question, my style of writing is very different from anyone who writes drama. When you write a drama, the only thing that you have, the only tool that you have is what the characters say to each other. So the character says, you know, you can't go inside the mind of the character. It is all about suggestion. And I find this kind of writing impossible. I cannot do it. Because if I have any talent as a writer, it is not in suggestion. It is in the explicit analysis of characters' states. And I know that this is very taboo because, you know, when you go to writing schools, they say things like, never try to be cleverer than your characters, or never put words inside characters' mouths, or never tell the reader directly things they haven't learnt indirectly from the character. All these rules I break. I don't just say, you know, she said, I love you. He said, I'm afraid it's not possible. I'll say, she said, I love you. And then I go, you know, for 10 pages into her psychology, her desires, her motives, where this has come from. And then he goes, you know, it's not possible. And again, I don't just stop it there, cut the scene. I then go on for another 10 pages and think, okay, why and how and what did he want to say, etc. And this is some people don't like it at all. Some people do. It's the opposite of show rather than tell. I like to tell rather than show. And as I say, this is against the rules of normal sort of 19th century fiction rules and the dramatic rules of drama. I'm attracted to that because ultimately I'm a psychological writer. What interests me is I use characters in order to try and discover psychological truths and in order to write down psychological truths. Characters for me I'm not interested in my characters for themselves. I'm interested in them as vehicles towards ideas and truth, which again is a real taboo. You know, you often hear writers saying things like, I've fallen in love with my characters and my characters made me go here or there. I didn't want to. My characters are living inside me. No, for me, my characters are dead. They are simply ways to get to certain ideas. And I tell you this honestly. I want to make them seem alive to the reader, but to me, they are vehicles for ideas. So I am purely an intellectual writer in that sense. What else? Yes, am I some kind of a preacher who wants to preach on? Yes, I am, I'm afraid. That's right, I want to try and preach to you, because I really want to preach to myself. What does preach mean? I want to make things clear. I want to arrive at psychological truths. You know, the other day I tweeted a psychological truth. The psychological truth was this. I said that people who've been well-parented have no desire to be famous. That the proof of a good parent is someone whose child doesn't want to become famous. Now, this was the result of sort of 30 pages of thinking about it and thinking about why people want to be famous, etc., etc. But at the end, I wanted to hit on one little psychological truth. And that's what excites me. I mean, every writer's excited by different things. I'm excited by coming at little psychological truths. And that's why I use characters, just to get me to there. So I'm being honest with you about why I use characters. What's my ultimate goal? Why do I write? I write to keep myself sane, to make you a little bit more sane, hopefully, to place certain truths in a beautiful form, to find a form for something that is normally messy, to make order in my mind and maybe in yours. The numbers, I like using numbers because it suggests a logic, it suggests a formality, it suggests an elegance, all of which I'm very attracted to. It's not possible to be formal and elegant and rational about many things that I write about, but I like the message to the reader, which is, let's try and make this tidy. Numbers are symbols of tidiness, and I love tidiness. I think civilization begins with tidiness, with a tidy suitcase, a tidy cupboard, a tidy shelf. This is what civilization is, making things tidy. And artists are people who try and make emotional life tidy. And in a small way, these numbers are symbols of my commitment to tidiness.
네. 자, 질문을
혹시
잠깐 더
제
해주시겠습니다.
말씀을 좀 잘못 들으신 거 아닌가 싶어가지고 높아심에 한 말씀 덧붙이겠습니다. 그러니까 그 계몽주의적 강박이라고 말씀을 드린 거는 뭐 이렇게 훈장질한다, 뭐 가르치려 든다 이런 좀 좋지 않은 의미로 말씀드린 건 아니었고요. 오히려 그 어떤 자비나 어떤 인간에 대한 연민 때문에 그걸 놓지 못하고 작가로서 계속 거기에 대해서 그 이야기를 하는 게 아닌가. 그래서 좀 호감을 가지고 질문을 드렸던 건데 혹시 또 뭐 훈계나 이런 게 또 좀 잘못 전달이 된 것 같아서 그런 의도는 아니었다고 말씀드리고 싶습니다.
Oh, that's very kind. So I didn't take offense or anything, but I just wanted to playfully say that yes, because it sounds quite grand. It sounds maybe arrogant to say yes, I want to enlighten, but it's true. I do, but I always start with me. I want to enlighten me first and foremost, and I think that's my goal. I've written every book from a personal problem. Even my book on architecture came from living in London and being in pain every day at how ugly the city is and how uglier it becomes every day. We have these bad property developers too. And it came from a personal pain about, so not just about love, but about everything. I wrote Status Anxiety because I had status anxiety. I wrote a book about travel because I couldn't understand why I was always so unhappy when I went abroad, I went on holiday. I could never really make it work for me. So I always start from me. I'm my first patient. I'm always the first patient.
네. 자, 다음 질문 계신가요? 그 두어 분만 질문을 더 받고 마무리를 해야 될 것 같습니다.
안녕하세요. 전 10년 동안 방송 작가 했던 곽민경이라고 하는데요. 최근에 책 한 번 꼭 내고 싶다 그 생각은 굉장히 오랫동안 했었는데 최근에 두 아이 남자아이들을 키우면서 육아 지침서를 쓰고 싶다는 생각이 들더라고요. 근데 사실 이제 방송 작가는 스크린 보고 이제 그 화면 보고 쓰는 글하고요. 책을 내는 그 책으로 이제 쓰는 거하고 굉장히 글이 다른데 그걸 어디서부터 자료 조사를 해야 될지 그리고 이렇게 뭐 자료 조사도 그렇고 이렇게 만약에 썼다 해도 그걸 가지고 누구한테 이렇게 보여줘서 괜찮은지 뭐 그런 것도 좀 어떻게 해야 되는지 잘 모르겠더라고요. 저는 쓰고는 싶은데 막 그 자료 그 자체가 너무 방대할 것 같고 근데 만약 썼다 해도 누구한테 이렇게 검사를 좀 받고 했으면 좋겠는데 혹시 그 선생님은 어떻게 하셨는지 처음에 글 쓰셨을 때 어떻게 하셨는지 좀 궁금해요.
I guess the first question you should be asking yourself is, in a busy world, why is it that we need a book about a woman raising two boys? What's the point? Why do we need this? And I think, we need lots of books that show us what life is really like. Because, as I said to you when I talked about The Foreigner, there are lots of areas of experience which just are a bit mysterious. And I think that there are not very many books on what it's really like to raise children. And the reason is that it's partly so horrible, and it's partly so nice, and it's partly so boring. So it's a mixture of very nice, very boring, and very horrible. And so novelists find it hard to describe this. There are very few children in fiction, very, very few good descriptions of childhood. One of the most moving books I read is published by an American writer called Nathaniel Hawthorne in the 19th century. And it's called something like 5 Days that Papa Spent with Little Bunny. And it's a diary of Nathaniel Hawthorne, great American writer, describing 5 days that he spent looking after his 4-year-old child, Little Bunny. And it's so beautiful because he describes in perfect detail all the things. Instantly Little Bunny seems charming, but crazy. He wants to do this, then he changes his mind, he wants to do that, he misses his mother, he doesn't miss his mother, he kicks his father, he wants to eat, he doesn't want to eat. You get the sense of the children are extraordinary and weird and amazing and boring and everything you like. And I remember reading this book and thinking, oh, that's really unusual. You don't really meet children in fiction in this way. So I would say to you, the purpose of your book is to give a really honest view of what it is like to raise two boys in ways that you hope will help people who are raising children and people who don't have children and people who might have children or are happy they never did or whatever, but that you will provide a mirror, a testimony to this business of raising children. And this is an important theme. It's as important as dying for love or shooting a gangster or any of the other more normal topics of literature. So you should take the topic seriously. It's a serious topic, a woman raising her children. But I think the number one thing you need is, as I say, honesty. You also need to understand what could interest somebody else and what might interest only you, insofar as the book is autobiographical. So, you need to be honest, you need to be skeptical, you need to have courage, all the things. I don't know any practicalities in Korea, but, find a friend who loves you and who has good taste in literature and show it to him or her, and that should be important. But at the end of the day, you are your own judge. You know what's wrong with the book and what's right with the book. So probably have a nice person near you tell you it's brilliant, and then you'll realize that it's not brilliant, but maybe one day it could be really very good. So we are all our best judges. All of us know inside what's wrong with books if we are honest with ourselves.
네, 꼭 쓰셔서 잘 되셨으면 좋겠습니다. 손을 들어주십시오.
저 알린드 보통 씨의 책을 좋아하는 독자로서 되게 궁금한 것은요. 우리가 외국 작가의 살아있는 외국 작가의 책을 우리 국내에서 이제 출판이 되어서 우리 손에 들어오기까지는 굉장히 많은 다양한 사람들의 손길이 필요하죠. 에이전시, 번역자, 편집자, 그리고 광고하는 사람과 마케팅을 해서 유통을 하는 사람까지 굉장히 많은 그런 단계들이 필요한데, 그래서 보통 씨는 우리나라의 여러 개 출판사와 저작권 계약을 맺고 있고 책을 출판하고 계신데요. 그래서 우리는 출판사마다 다른 얼굴의 보통 씨를 만나게 되는 것 같아요. 다른 번역자, 다른 편집자, 다른 디자인. 그래서 굉장히 다른 느낌이 들어요. 그래서 그럼 작가는 우리 한국에 소개된 책들 중에서 어떤 책이 가장 아름답고 한국의 독자들에게 자신의 작품이 잘 전달되었다고 느끼는지 그게 참 궁금했습니다. 그리고 그것이 한국에서의 어떤 출판했을 때와 또는 서양에서 영어로 출판했을 때와 어떻게 다른지 그게 궁금했습니다.
Yeah. I wonder if I can ask you a question, which is, what do you mean by appearing in different ways that my books? Do you mean the jacket is different, the graphic feel is different, or do you mean the translation is very different, or do you mean the outside of the book and like the impression it gives, or do you mean the translation?
네, 심지어 문체도 다릅니다. 예, 출판사에 따라서 누구의 손길을 거쳤느냐, 번역을 누가 했느냐, 편집을 누가 했느냐, 어느 출판사에서 나왔느냐에 따라서 광고 카피 한 줄도 다르고요. 디테일한 책을 구성하는 요소들이 다 다르게 느껴지거든요. 그리고 문학 소설이었을 때와 에세이였을 때도 굉장히 다르고.
Yeah. Yes. Look, this topic makes me very nervous. Because, you know, as a writer, you'll know this, you care about every single word. You know, you will rewrite a sentence, 10 times. And then you give it to a translator. I think I met one Korean translator, but on the whole, they are never in touch with me. I always encourage the publishing house, I say, put the translator in touch with me. They're never in touch. And they, actually once, in Essays in Love, the translator contacted me. There's a scene where the heroine, Chloe, goes to a place called Safeway and buys something. And the translator came back going, is Safeway a kind of feeling that you have when you want to buy things? I said, oh, no, this is a big problem. Safeway is the name of a shop in England. It's the name of a shop. But unless this person had asked me, they would have been translated just according to the translator's idea of what Safeway might mean. So I imagine that probably, 50 to, let's say around 50% of my book is probably lost in translation because it has been badly translated or inaccurately translated. I fear. Simply knowing, I know how to speak French and German. And when I get the drafts back of German and French books, oh my God, it's just a different thing. And there are nuances, and then I have to basically rewrite the whole thing to make sure that it is again, and particularly things like the sense of humor and the irony, and it's just, it's very, very difficult. Translators are paid nothing. In Korea, as elsewhere, they are paid a tiny amount. They are made to rush their work. Their art is not treated seriously. Publishers refuse to take translation seriously. And they think it doesn't matter. It matters enormously, enormously. And I think the only people who are properly translated in Korea from the West are dead writers who are classics, who've been translated a number of times by people who were given a lot of money, or university people who've been able to spend a lot of time and can really do it properly. I think commercial fiction and non-fiction that is translated quickly is almost always suffering from some kind of translation problem. Look, I wrote books which were, I wrote several books which were about relationships. And many female buyers bought these books in Korea. And publishers, I hope none of my publishers are here. They're very lovely people. Are they here? But Publishers are a little bit naive. So they think, oh, these were bought by women. Ah, women. What do women like? Well, women love the color pink. And what else do they love? Oh, they love hearts. Yes, they love hearts. So, but lots of pink and lots of hearts, because that's what women like. Now, the women I like don't normally like this kind of thing. So, I'm sorry to any woman who has picked up a book like that and said, oh my God, it doesn't look like the kind of book for me because it looks like it's bubble gum. It's like, so I think this is a problem. And I think publishers are very scared of anything that looks too serious. They think if it's serious, it cannot sell because most people are idiots, so we must have something for everyone, and everyone is an idiot, so the more stupid we make the book jacket, the more it can sell. So, it's terrible how they think, really terrible. And it's not true, it's not accurate. So I love elegance, I love simplicity, I love, nothing patronizing. And so sometimes I get these books and I think, oh my God, and then I write a letter to the editor going, look, I'm not sure this is right. And they go, no, don't worry, you don't understand the Korean market. You don't understand Korean people. I say, well, I think I understand people, and I think Koreans are people, so I think I understand Korean people. They go, no, you don't understand anything. So I have to give up. And then I write books about, architecture or something. And then they say, it's a book about architecture. But really, it's a book about love, isn't it? So we put some hearts on it, we'll make it pink again, and we'll try and tell people that it's about love. Because the book about love sold well, so maybe the book about architecture can sell well. And then I tell them, but the people who might buy a book about architecture, they don't think like this. They're maybe design students, etc., and they really want a beautifully designed book, not something with pink bubble gum on the cover. They you don't understand Korean people. So, to answer your question, I think that the presentation of my books is, in general, patronizing to the reader. I think that I think the books are more serious than their jackets. Not serious like serious, but more human, more honest, more, I don't know. There's a certain silliness to the design. And I think that is not doing justice to you, the readers. But you've come here today, so thank you anyway for seeing through that problem. Yeah.
자, 100% 완벽한 번역이 앞으로도 꼭 이루어져서 더 많은 공감을 이뤄냈으면 좋겠습니다. 자, 마지막으로 질문 하나만 더 받고 마치도록 하겠습니다.
예, 지금까지 여러 질문에 답해 주시면서 말씀이 좀 나오기도 한 것 같고 또 짐작도 되기는 하지만 마지막 질문이니까 알랭드 보통 씨가 생각하시는 좋은 작가란 무엇인지, 그 다음에 보통 씨는 좋은 작가가 되기 위해서 어떤 노력을 하시는지 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Look, I think great writers ultimately are great psychologists. They understand how human beings work. This is the number one skill. And they see beneath the dishonesty of everyday life, the lies, the compromises, and they are brave enough to describe life as it really is lived, rather than as we think it should be lived or as we're afraid it should be lived. I think great writers also are very ambitious about what writing can do. If you look at someone like Tolstoy or Proust, these people wanted to change the world. And this sounds like a big idea, like what do you mean change the world? They really thought that through writing they could change the mentality of their people and rescue people and help people and change life. So I think part of being a good writer is being very ambitious about what writing can do. It's not just entertainment, it's not just distraction. It is the replacement for religion. It is the place where we now find meaning and hope and consolation and understanding. All these things that previously we might have looked to religion to. So real ambition at the level of what literature can do, and real honesty at the level of psychology. I think that's what writing does.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
자, 오늘 함께하신 두 분의 초청 강의 어떠셨는지 모르겠습니다. 여러분 방송 콘텐츠 또 문화 콘텐츠를 생산하시는 분들이기 때문에 오늘 두 분의 강연이 아주 큰 자극이 되셨으면 좋겠습니다. 창작 의욕을 아주 고취시키는 시간 꼭 되셨길 바라고요. 이 한국방송작가협회와 SBS 문화재단이 공동 주최하는 이 방송작가 마스터 클래스는 내년도 이어집니다. 내년에도 꼭 다시 볼 수 있길 바랍니다. 자, 이상으로 2013년 방송작가 마스터 클래스를 마치겠습니다. 긴 시간 동안 함께해 주신 여러분 고맙습니다.